Hello, folks. My name is Andrew Gilmore, and this is my podcast, Mostly Movies, Maybe Music, where I'm going to be interviewing people involved in the creative arts. And I'm recording this in late December, so right around the holiday season, so I think I need to wait until January to start booking some guests. But in the meantime, I thought I would post something from my archives. This is an interview that I recorded in 2008, and I thought this would be kind of the pilot episode for the podcast. And this is an interview with a friend of mine whose name was Bill Frabizio. And Bill was a trumpet player who mostly worked in jazz, although he played classical music too. But in this interview, he talks mostly about jazz. And he knew just about everybody, all the big names that you could think of. He knew Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, Charlie Parker, all kinds of people. He crossed paths with Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Sammy Davis Jr., you name it. He knew all those guys, and he had stories about them. So I knew him because he was a professor at Arcadia University, which was my alma mater. Sorry, I almost couldn't say it there. So I was taking a journalism class years ago, and they assigned us to do an interview of our choice, and I chose to interview Bill because I'm a big jazz fan, and I wanted to hear his stories about the people that he worked with. So we did an interview, and that's what you're going to hear. And unfortunately, Bill is no longer with us. He passed away in 2018. I'm sorry to say, but you'll hear from this interview what a nice guy he was. He was just a very sweet guy, and I miss him. And I think it's typical of him that he was so generous with his time because he gave me about an hour and a half for this interview. And I remember that it was just very spontaneous. I just asked him, when I was attending one of his classes, I asked him before class, can we do the interview? Can I interview you tonight? And he said, yeah, we can do it tonight. So we did. And I remember it was maybe around 11 o'clock by the time we finished, but he didn't rush me through it or anything. He just, in spite of how late it was, he just gave me all the time in the world and answered all my questions. And, I think that just proves what a generous and kind guy he was, that he just gave me as much time as I needed. So he was just a great guy, and I think you'll hear from the interview how nice he was and how comfortable we were with each other, and the friendship that we had. And so I wanted to post this. I thought it would make kind of a pilot episode for the podcast because it's a good interview. I think I asked some decent questions, and he seemed to appreciate the questions that I asked. So I think it went well, and would be kind of a good sample interview to start things off. But more importantly than that, I just wanted to pay tribute to Bill because he was my friend, and I wanted to post this in his memory. So, and for those of you who are listening to this who are jazz fans, I think you'll enjoy hearing this because he had a lot of interesting things to say about the people that he worked with. So I think that's about all I need to say by way of introduction. So I hope you'll enjoy hearing this, and I'm hoping to book more interviews after the new year. So this is my interview from 2008 with my friend Bill Frabizio. So I guess to start with some of the vital statistics. I know it's not that polite to ask this, but would you mind telling me how old you are?
Oh, okay. I was born October 10th, 1929. So in another
78.
few weeks, I'm going to be 79.
Oh, God bless you.
Thank you.
That's great. And you were born in New Jersey?
Yep, I was born in the house where we live now.
Oh.
The house itself was built in 1632.
Oh, wow.
It was the original ferry house for the whole area. It's an old stone house. In some places, the walls are 4 and 5 feet thick. And it was built in 1632. So I was born in that house because they didn't, they didn't believe in hospitals back then.
What city's that in?
Oh, Stockton, New Jersey.
Stockton.
You know what, Andy? It's, I think, a little less than 600 people now.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was growing up, it was probably around 500. Most of the people who lived there were immigrant, again, Italians, because they came, there are quarries all around there. And these were stonecutters. And they were also my grandparents who took over that house in the late 1800s. Took it over because there's a large property that goes with it. And of course there were gardens and they had their own chickens and that kind of stuff. So that's, and Stockton is a very, very rural town. I mean, the public school right now has only 38 kids in it.
Huh. It's funny, I don't think of New Jersey as being rural, but I guess.
Well, yeah, you know what? It's, I tell you what, Andy, it's 3 miles north of New Hope, but just on the other side of the river.
Oh, yeah, I've been up to New Hope a number of times, so
Yeah,
I know that area.
yeah,
Right across.
yeah, sure. Well, this is north of that,
Uh-huh.
but on the Jersey side.
Right.
A really small town.
Yeah. So I guess let's start at the beginning. How did you start to study music? How did you get interested?
Oh, okay. My father was played excellent guitar and fooled around with a lot of other instruments, including things like musical saws and stuff like that. And my father was an engineer. My mother was a school teacher. She was a principal of a school who played piano, so I can't ever remember not playing piano. And I started studying, I don't want to make this too detailed, but I started studying trumpet at about age 9. And by age 11, I was playing in a lot of groups, anything from marching bands, or what they were calling then street bands, concert bands. And then I was playing in big bands and dance bands because World War II started right around 1941, and I was 11 years old. And so I became pretty adept at all of that, you know. And then I actually was going to be an engineer like my father. I was enrolled in Lehigh University, really. And toward the end of the summer, I said, geez, you know, I think I'd like to study music. And so I went to a conservatory of music, and that's what happened. But prior to that, Paul Whiteman lived in our hometown. He lived in our hometown, and I was lucky enough to play with him when I was 16 years old during some of his dates that he was doing as a kind of a Gershwin-ish type evening and so forth.
What was he like?
Paul Whiteman, a sweet, wonderful man. I can't say enough about him. He was an absolute sweetheart, very big man.
Yeah, I've seen
Very big.
pictures.
I saw him about less than a week before he died.
Oh, wow.
And a couple things about him. He drank a lot, and he would drink a lot in that what is the small hotel in Stockton, New Jersey. That's where Rodgers and Hart wrote that tune, Small Hotel, that's in Pal Joey. Anyhow, he would go there and get himself pretty well tanked up, and then we'd all have to help him go home.
I guess a lot of musicians do, don't they?
I'm sorry?
I guess a lot of musicians do drink a lot, don't they?
Yeah, yeah. He was a sweet, sweet man and a great musician.
Yeah, I've heard a
A
lot of his records.
terrific musician, and I played very good violin at one time. Played in many symphony orchestras, but he was also a good businessman, and he had a command of the language that was incredible. I mean, I spent 3 years overseas in the Army, and some of the language gets a little rough when you're out in the field all the time, but it was nothing compared to Whiteman. He had very graphic language, but a sweet, wonderful, wonderful man.
Oh, well, where did you study music? I know you mentioned
Okay,
Juilliard.
I first I took, well, from my mother, piano,
Yeah.
and my father, little guitar and stuff, and then when I was just about 9 years old, I wanted to study trumpet, and I went to the Doylestown Conservatory of Music, which is, I don't know if you know where Doylestown is.
I don't think I've been up there.
It's about a dozen miles from New Hope.
Okay.
And I went. My cousins and I all went over there. One cousin played the keyboards and accordion. Another cousin played clarinet, and I played trumpet. And so I started there. And this was I was about 9 years old, so it was before World War II started. Then World War II came along and continued. Then after high school, studied all through high school, and then after high school I went to a conservatory of music.
But, I thought you mentioned Juilliard at some point during class.
Well, actually, at the school that I went to was a satellite of Juilliard. Because Juilliard at that time, this was in the fall of 1947. So there were a lot of GIs that came back after 1945, and so Juilliard was loaded with people. So they set up these satellite schools, and one of which was in Trenton. But we had all Juilliard professors there.
Now, one of the things that amazes me when I listen to music is just when I listen to somebody like Fats Waller or Charlie Parker, somebody who really plays an instrument really well. It just amazes me because I don't really have a lot of musical skill myself, and I just think, you know, how the hell do they do that when I listen to music?
You know what?
So how do you? I mean, there must have been a point where you couldn't play very well. I can't imagine, you know, what the process is. How you get to be
It's
good.
a funny thing. You just get used to never being satisfied with what you're playing. Never being satisfied, so you practice all the time.
Yeah.
You see? And you just keep at it. And then, of course, as you're working, and God knows we all work, you constantly analyze what you're doing with your instrument. And you go back and always the fundamentals.
I wish I had the time to learn it, but I guess my skills.
Well, you know what?
lie in other areas.
Maybe you'll get some time, because it's a very, very satisfying kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
Those of us who, you know, and I made a living in music aside from doing stuff like this all my life, and it's a very gratifying type of work. It really is, you know, because you're kind of always analyzing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think my talents just lie in other areas. I don't think I have the knack for music myself, but I always enjoy.
But you can't. You know what? You can't tell. You give it a shot and see.
Well, I kind of have. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, and I can fool around a little on the piano, but I never really learned to play.
Well, you should. You know what? You should come to Al Byer's class. Al Byer has a class in keyboards, and we'll give you a keyboard and everything. So you know, come and try, give it a try.
Yeah, maybe I will.
It's very satisfying, Andy. You know, and guess what? You know what? It's really very relaxing too, because what happens if you were to take piano again, you'd find yourself closing everything else out around you and concentrating on that, and that in itself is relaxing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I used to love to play the piano, even though I couldn't do it that well. It was really, I really felt good doing it. It was very relaxing.
Well, you know what? You can develop whatever you want with it. Yeah.
So that leads into my next question a little bit. What's it like being a working musician? I mean, what are the pros and cons of doing this for a living?
Oh, being a musician, I think probably those of us in my generation lived through the best time of it for musicians. We all worked a lot, and you can make a tremendous living and in music, and the only thing is, most of the time, if you're a big band musician or a studio musician, and I was a studio musician for a long time in New York and so forth, but then, you know, it puts a strain on relationships, and so you have to have a very understanding spouse, and because you know, most families, the husband is home at night, where as a musician you're not.
So how often do you write?
Almost every day.
Almost every day. Well,
Yeah, almost every day. I just finished a march dedicated to a friend of mine who died a few months ago.
Oh, sorry.
And yeah, he was a very good friend. And I sent that to England, and I sent it. It'll go to my publisher, and it'll go to the high school where he and I both went. And but I write all the time. All the time.
Are a lot of them just things that people commission you to write, or do you just, a lot
A lot of things are
ideas?
commissioned. A lot of things are published. I saw one here. I'll give it to you. This happens to be one of the kinds of things that I do. I just happen to have that with me, Andy. But it's one of those things that you get caught up in, and you do. And I've been very lucky. My family has always been very understanding in that we had an entire house that was devoted just to music. And we lived in now what we did, since we were flooded a few times, we gave my daughter and her husband the main house, and my wife and I are living in the little house now. But the entire back end of it is just devoted to music. And the thing is that I have 3 children, and they always understood that when I was writing, it was something that I did. But I don't think you can carry on anything in music without the understanding of those people around you.
Yeah. How do you get the ideas for the things that you write? What's the process?
Oh, very good. Good point. There are probably 2 distinct areas to creating music, as far as I'm concerned. Some you write, like string quartets and symphonies and stuff like that. You write as an expression for yourself, and then maybe somebody will appreciate it or maybe not. And then there's the commercial side of it. Then you write arrangements for whatever. I've written music for everything from Penn State to Ohio State to Rutgers University, Temple University, for their marching bands. See, and stuff like this, which is published. So that's another end of it. There's always a personal side of a kind of just making that statement in music that you want to make. I hope that makes some sort of sense to you. But some of it is commercial, from the standpoint of it. Yeah, it's revenue. It brings in money. You know.
You got money. So how early did you start to write music after you learned to play?
Oh, that's a good point. I think my mother said that I was always writing music. I don't remember, but she kept a lot of my little notebooks and stuff. But by the time I was in high school, by the time I was in 9th grade, I was already writing for any groups that I could get a hold of. But you know what, Andy? That's not unusual with musicians. I think it's not so special. It's what you do. You know what I mean?
So I'm going to take a bit of a different tack here. Something I was wondering. Are you interested in things that are kind of a little more modern, like say rock and roll or things like that? Do you have any interest in that?
One of the pieces that I finished this summer was a rock piece. Instrumental. So I mean, there were no words to the piece. I wrote a rock, and I've done some arranging for rock of existing rock pieces. I don't think I ever wrote a rock piece, to tell you the truth, that wasn't instrumental. I mean, so far as words and so forth. Right now I'm trying to put together a rock piece which is about, of all things, a delicatessen in South Philly that's called How You Doing. And I'll bring you a copy of the main melody. I'll bring it in. Yeah. There's a delicatessen called How You Doing.
Never heard of it. But
Well, it's in South Philly, and it's one of those like the various steakhouses and stuff, But I played a lot of rock music, and so far as whatever acts came in when I was a staff musician in Atlantic City or in New York or whatever, they would have full arrangements. Ray Charles, people like that. Not the standard, what you would expect, a couple guitars, bass, drums, and vocal. These were larger orchestras, yeah.
So do you enjoy listening to rock and roll, like say the Beatles or Rolling Stones, things like that? Or
Some
just
things,
kind of ignore them?
yeah. Some things I really enjoy. Some things I enjoy. I always like groups like, Chicago, Blood, Sweat, Tears. I think Celine Dion is magnificent. Yeah,
One of my favorites is the Velvet Underground. What do you think of that?
Oh, yeah, I don't know that much about it. I really don't, but I'd like to. You know, always trying to listen to something new.
Are you familiar with the work of John Cale?
Little bit, yeah.
He's
Yeah.
He's an amazing guy.
Oh, yeah. A lot of good stuff out there, Andy.
Yeah.
A lot of good stuff out there, and I would hope that that we would get more exposure to it. My main objection is that things cost too much.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to a concert, it costs an arm and a leg
Yeah.
now. You know, and it just doesn't. I think it should be more accessible. I think more
Yeah,
people would.
definitely.
Yeah.
Do you listen to music at home to relax, or is it a stream because you're around music all the day and work?
Boy, that's a good question. Sometimes I do. Sometimes, yeah. And if I do, I usually listen to something of the Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven group. You know,
Yeah.
nothing that strains your mind too
Yeah, I
much.
wouldn't think so. Yeah, because for me, music is much more of a hobby, and then I wonder what does a musician listen to when they're around music for their work all day. So
Ah.
just a thought.
Yeah, it's hard to get time, Andy, to just sit down with your own for your you sometimes even feel guilty, especially if you've got a family.
Yeah.
You feel guilty just taking time for yourself, But yeah, there's music around all the time.
And what else do you do besides music? Do you have any hobbies or anything?
Oh, good point. I run. I was always a runner, 25 miles a week. And a weightlifter. Always punch bags. We have a heavy bag and a light bag at home. And so a lot of physical stuff. I played football in high school, played basketball in high school. And then when you're a professional musician, you have to watch out because you're this is your livelihood.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I don't play golf anymore, but because I'm not playing well, and I don't. But I love golf; it's good. But anything physical activity, I love. Now I had a heart attack a few years ago, so now I walk. I don't run.
Yeah, I would think so. My family's a big reading family. Do you like to read?
Oh yeah, I read all the time too. Yeah.
What kinds of things?
Boy, anything. Right now, this will surprise the hell out of you, I'm sure. Right now, I'm reading Greek literature.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me too much.
I don't know. I just, as a matter of fact, today, I was reading portions of Dido and Aeneas.
I don't know that one.
Well, Aeneas was a very interesting guy who fought in the Trojan War, and he came. And what part I was reading today was where he came to Carthage, and the queen of Carthage was Dido, and she falls in love with him, and he ultimately consults the gods, and they say, you have to go home. And so he has to leave her, and she throws herself on a funeral pyre and dies. And it's but there was an opera written on that story, Dido and Aeneas. I'm very interested in ancient mythology right now. Right now, yeah.
So let's talk about your career here for a bit. When did you start to teach here?
Oh, teaching. Funny. I was playing, I'll try and make this real short. When I was in college at the Conservatory of Music, we studied all music, and we had English and languages and history, and everything else was all music. And I was playing 7 nights a week in a nightclub, and we were playing for big acts like Jack Benny and the Red Skelton and people like that. And I was working 7 nights a week. And I decided that, gee, maybe, the bass player and I were talking, let's see if we can get credentials to teach. And so I decided, I would finish the conservatory, and then I went to Temple University to get a teaching certificate. I was a student teacher, and I loved it. Then the Army. I came along. I spent 3 years in the Army overseas. And When I came back, I was playing music, and I took a job teaching, and absolutely loved it. Loved teaching, and that was in a private school near my home, near Solebury, Pennsylvania, by the way, which is right outside of New Hope. And then my father died very suddenly, and I decided to stay home because my mother was there. And I decided that I would still stay in music, but that I would take a teaching job. I taught at Pennsbury High School. Loved it. Absolutely loved every minute of it. I was a band director there. I decided I wanted my doctorate because I always wanted to teach in college. And I got my doctorate at Temple University and took a job there. I was a professor there for 3 years. Then I went to Boston, and then I came here. I taught in Boston, and I came here. But teaching is a very, very gratifying type of profession. It really, really is, you know. I get to meet people like you that I would never have met
Oh, well, thank you.
had I been doing something else, you know.
So what is your doctorate in?
Oh, composition.
Composition.
Composition with a concentration in musicology.
And how long have you been teaching here?
I came here in 1970.
70. Wow.
Yeah. So it's coming up 39 years, I guess. Yeah, it's funny, Andy. I came here and I thought, well, I'll stay about 4 or 5 years because back then I was told that if they didn't get somebody like me in here, they were going to close the music department. So I said, well, okay. We developed a big music program, made commercial records, had a graduate program and all, and everything. And I made so many close friends here. Some of the nicest people I've ever known in my life are here. Some are still here. Barbara Nodine, for example.
I don't know her.
She was the head of the psychology department. Now she's some sort of a dean, I guess. And Dr. Chohan,
I don't know.
Ray Rose, Dr. Rose used to be in the biology department. Dick Werdheim in the English department. I don't know any people in the world that are this as fine as these people. And so I wound up staying because of the people who are here.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I have something here that a friend of ours gave me. You know anything about this?
Yeah, this is a commercial record that we made here.
Yeah, was this something you could just go into a record store and buy, or was it?
Yeah, it was
the
for
school?
sale. Yeah.
Because that surprised me when I saw it. I wondered how it came about.
Yeah, we had they're all students on that.
Uh huh.
If you get to listen to it, you'll be surprised.
Yeah, I listened to it. It's excellent.
Yeah. We had a big band here. We had a jazz program and so forth. You know.
What happened to it? We don't seem to have it.
That's a good question. I don't know. Somebody just didn't want it. And your colleges and universities are run by boards of trustees and business offices and stuff like that. And very often they neglect some of the areas that you and I would think would be important. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so they just de-emphasize things.
The same thing is happening to the radio station. I have a radio show, and we're falling apart over there.
Yeah, well, see, you know what? There again, isn't that important? Don't you think radio is I think radio is more important than television, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, often, yeah.
But they don't support that?
No, not really.
Well, let me exert some, let me write some memos and see some
Yeah,
people
you'll have to.
and see if we can't get some more support for that. Because I think do you know something? There's an antenna in the ceiling of Murphy Hall that was for a commercial radio station that used Beaver College as a transmitter.
Right, we used to be on that.
Yeah. And so, there's a long history attached to this place. And they ought to have a radio studio here. They ought to have, they have a communications major, but I don't know what they're doing with that.
I don't know either exactly. They have a nice studio. It's just not tended to very well.
Well, they need, you know what they need? They need to emphasize a little more.
Yeah.
When nobody hears about it, maybe we'll get the word out. Let's get the word out.
Yeah, I would hope so. I think it's just my family that listens to my show. Nobody hears it.
Yeah.
But in a way, that's kind of part of the fun of it for me. But that's just me. Maybe having a small audience and having that spontaneous feel to it,
Radio, good luck. Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Well,
We can
thanks.
certainly shout a lot and bring some pressure on some people.
I've been doing it for 2 years, so I'm pretty comfortable where it is, I guess.
But is that what you want to do, Andy, when you finish?
That's a hell of a question. At this point, I'm not really that sure what I want to do when I get out of here.
Well, I tell you, there's always room for good people in that field. Do you know that? And I think radio is very strong.
Yeah, I love
Very,
doing it.
very strong. Yeah, it's extremely important. Larry Kane lives here in Glenside.
Yeah.
He was the Channel 6 anchor for a long time.
Yeah.
And we had him here. We brought him here. Music department sponsored him a few years ago. Very nice man. And another woman who was with public radio, Lynn Lonkers, her name is from this area.
I'm going to change the subject a bit. You talked about this a little bit in class earlier tonight, and I don't want to bring up too many painful memories for you, but what can you tell me about your time in the Army?
Okay.
Maybe
I'll make it real short.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I
don't want to make
went
it
through
uncomfortable.
ROTC in college. So I graduated as a second lieutenant. The Korean War was on.
Right.
I reported for duty. 3 weeks later, I was in Korea. I was in Special Forces Infantry. When the Korean War ended, and the armistice was in July.
54.
Shortly after 50, and anyhow, shortly after the armistice, I was interviewed because I was with the 1st Cavalry Division at 29th Infantry, and then I had an opportunity to go with the 3rd Cavalry, which was going to Germany as border troops, and I said, well, gee, I'll do that. And so I ultimately became a commanding officer of an armored reconnaissance unit that was along the east-west border in Germany.
Were you actually on the front line?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Yeah.
That's real.
Now, the strange thing about it is that when I was graduating from college and we were getting our shots to go in the Army and everything, the colonel called me and he said, hey, I heard about your background. And I had been with guys like Dorsey and whatever. He said, I think you should go into the entertainment area. And he said, I would be very willing to approach the Inspector General and have you stationed at Fort Meade, Maryland, and you would be in entertainment. And I said, I don't think I want to do that. I said, I think I'll stick with. He said, well, they're going to put you in a ground outfit. I said, well, that would be all right. He said, well, will you promise me you'll talk with your parents? And my father was a World War I veteran.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
And so I remember talking with him. I came home. I was working 6 nights a week, and this was a Saturday morning. I came home from college, and I said, hey, Pop, I've had a chance to go into music. And I told him initially that I would rather stay with what I am trained. He said, and my father often said this to me, you know what to do, kid. And that's how I wound up in the combat outfit.
And this is something that I think about sometimes. Of course, I mean, there are all these books about the 2 world wars and everything, but why do you suppose the Korean War has kind of been forgotten by the historians?
Yeah, it is. It is rather forgotten, and maybe it's a good thing. It was not a very pleasant time.
Yeah, I would think
And Germany during the so-called Cold War was not a very pleasant time either. And so, if you can put those things behind us, maybe it's better off. I just hope and pray that guys like you don't have to go through all of that. Because
I couldn't pass the physical, actually.
well, you know what? Even or friends of yours too. The point is that I saw a lot of guys that didn't make it out. They never got to see color television, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's bothersome, and I just hope that I hope we can avoid wars, Sandy. I'm going to bring you.
Yeah.
I'll bring you next week when I bring your syllabus. I'll bring you a copy of the World War II study that I did, and there's some stuff in there that may be interesting reading to you.
Yeah, my grandfather was a World War II veteran. So.
Huh?
My grandfather was in World War II. So.
Yeah, yeah, oh, yeah. A half a century ago or more now.
Yeah.
God bless him. Yeah. Is he still living?
No, he passed away a number of years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was very, very upsetting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was I did a study of the music of World War II.
Yeah.
And it's in 2 volumes. They're about 2 inches thick, the 2 volumes. I'll bring you a copy next week.
It was a good era for music, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah, the music is, don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me, or I'll be home for Christmas, and, that kind of stuff.
Getting back to music, I think one of the main things I'm going to emphasize in the article I write is all the stories I imagine you have about all these people you've known. So I'm just going to fire some of these names at you. We've talked about Paul Whiteman. You said you played with the bands that worked with Jack Benny and Red Skelton and people like that, right?
Yeah.
Did you?
Well, you know what? When you work in the studios, I was in a studio, a television orchestra, and there were different acts that came in there each week for the show. I was at CBS.
Yeah.
That's when all the great orchestras were in New York. Okay. The Johnny Carson show came out in New York. The Dick Cavett show came out in New York. Judy Garland came out in New York. Jackie Gleason, all of those big shows came out in New York, and I happened to be at CBS. And then in subsequent years after those things sort of dried up, then I worked for years from the 1980s until just a couple of years ago in Atlantic City. And I worked, there'd be a different show each week. And all the big names come in. Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Diana Ross, Peggy Lee. They worked for Judy Garland for a while. So but you know what? It's a job.
Yeah.
It's a gig, man.
Yeah.
You make money with that. One thing about we mentioned teaching.
Yeah.
Teaching doesn't pay as much as people think it does.
So I hear, yeah.
I mean, the teachers are not that well paid. I mean, we make a decent living,
Yeah.
and so forth. But I've always worked as a trumpet player in addition to doing teaching.
Yeah. And some of the other names that I know you mentioned in the class last semester that you knew Charlie Parker very well.
Yeah, well, I knew him as well as you could know him.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
He lived on Meeting House Road, which is right outside of New Hope. Then he moved to Point Pleasant, Pennsylvania, which is about 6 miles north, Andy. You know what? That's where the two brides come out of now. It's a big tubing center where you can rent a tube and float down the river on it and come down to Stockton, and they drive you back to your car or something. But he lived there, and I had met him, and he used to hang out at a place called the Gobblers, which was a jazz joint. And the owner of the place was a bass player and was a good friend of mine. And I remember when I came back from Korea and I was going to go to Germany, and I was home for a couple days, I got a call from Joe Butera, who owned the Gobblers, and he said, "Hey, Charlie stopped in to say so long to you." So Charlie Parker lived right near there. And his wife Chan we became as close as you could get to him, although it was hard.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah. Brilliant guy.
Absolutely.
Died. Yeah. Unfortunately, he was a victim of the system.
Yeah.
For a while when I was with Della Reese, I roomed with a guy who was a bass player at Birdland, and he recalled times when they would bring Charlie Parker in and record live with him. And he would record 7, 8, 9 hours straight. And he'd be throwing up and everything else, just very sick very sick because he didn't make his connection or something like that. And the record companies just went ahead and took advantage of him that way. They could control him because he was very, very, very much hooked on heroin.
Yeah.
A very talented man, made a tremendous contribution to music. I didn't know. I knew him about as well as you could know him.
Yeah. Was he a pleasant guy to know?
And yeah, for the most part, he was a very humble man, very, very pleasant. I think he had been hurt a great deal racially,
Yeah.
and was a little skeptical of guys like me.
Yeah, I don't think so.
You know,
Yeah.
and rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so. You know, talking about him, Miles Davis didn't like me at all. He used to call me a white MF.
Yeah.
You know, and I said to him, "Well, Miles, you're half right." You know, but no, Charlie Parker was, I think, a very, very talented man. It's a very sad, sad story.
Yeah, really. I was just listening to some of his stuff this morning. So.
Huh?
I was just listening to some of his stuff this morning. So,
Yeah. Very innovative. Very. His wife, although I don't know if they were ever married, Chan Parker. She called herself Chan Parker. She was later married to Phil Woods, a saxophone player. And I think she had a lot to do with steering him in the right direction and kind of managing him, you know? Because I think he was all into music. He didn't care much about anything else.
Yeah.
And she took pretty good care of him. I tried to keep good care of him physically too, because he was a pretty sick guy. So she was a greater lady than you could imagine. She died only a couple years ago in Paris, matter of fact.
And that, of course, leads us to Dizzy. What can you tell me about him?
Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah.
I talked to him on the phone within about a week before he died. Yeah. I'll tell you what happened. I was working at Showboat in Atlantic City, and I was doing shows at the Sands and at Caesars at night. So I was working the afternoon as a trumpet player at the Showboat. And the guys who came in with Sinatra that I knew, and I didn't play Sinatra that time, the guys that I knew came in to see me at the Showboat. And after I finished, then we all sat down and had a bite to eat together. Buddy Childers and Jay Corey and guys like that I had worked with Sinatra. And they had just been up to see Diz. And they said that he was not going to make it. He was very ill. And so they said, let's give him a call. And so we called him when we all spoke to him. And of all things, he said, what mouthpiece you playing on, man? And we talked mouthpieces over the phone.
Oh, how long had you known him?
I had first met him, I want to say 1949 or 19, yeah, I was still in college.
So right when he was
49 or
starting.
50. He came to a place called the Greenbrier on a Monday night in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And I happened to be in the show band that was playing Tuesday through Sunday, and we had Mondays off. And they would bring in these stars, jazz stars, Parker, Gillespie, on Monday. And that's when I first met him. I would say it would probably been 1949, 1950.
What was he like?
Oh, a sweetheart. Absolute sweetheart. One of the sweetest people you'd ever want to know in your life. I mean, really, truly, a hell of a good trumpet player.
Yeah.
A very fine trumpet player. And I mean, he earned his name. He was nuts. He was funny, but one of the great people I've ever known. And if there's a hereafter, I hope he's in a good spot because he deserves it.
What kind of things did he do that were so nuts?
Well, when he would come on stage, for example, he would turn the gain up very high on the PA system, and it would whistle all over the place, and he'd laugh about that. And he played trumpet upside down sometimes and whatever. But he was just a hell of a nice guy. Really nice man. You would have enjoyed meeting him, really.
Yeah, and what about Ellington?
Oh, Duke Ellington. Met him twice.
Twice.
I was in the show orchestra one summer at the Music Circus in Lambertville, New Jersey. It was a tent theater and around, different show every week. And so we had Monday nights off, and Monday nights they would bring in Ellington, Basie, Maynard Ferguson, Dave Brubeck, people like that. And when they brought Ellington here, Ellington stayed at the Lambertville House, which is right on the corner of Union Street and Bridge Street in Lambertville. And it's an old hotel, been there since the Revolutionary War days. And so Ellington was staying there. A friend of mine, who was a drummer, was the manager of that hotel. And so after Ellington finished his show, the band bus took most of the guys back to New York, and he stayed over. And so we went in to have ice cream with Ellington, and we sat there and talked for quite a while. I found out that his drummer, who was Sonny Greer, went to school with my father in Long Branch, New Jersey. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that's great.
Red Bank and Long Branch. Then the second time I met him, many years later, I was playing the Ringling Brothers Circus in the Center City. I think at the Spectrum or someplace like that. And so one of the trumpet players said, "Hey, Ellington's band is over in Pennsauken. There was a ballroom in Pennsauken. I forget the name of it now." So after the show, we finished the show playing for the Elephants and all that, and we jump in the car right away and we go over to catch Ellington. And he came down and talked with us during his break, and one of the guys said to him, "Hey, Duke, what do you listen to? What's a good dance band?" And he said, "Well, if I'm going to go out dancing, I'm going to dance to Guy Lombardo." And I said, "Oh my God!" But that's the second time. I met him just twice. A very, 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 very nice man.
I'll bet. Yeah.
A good-looking man too. Really striking personality. His son Mercer, I knew him. Mercer was a conductor for a while for Della Reese. Mercer, then Mercer died. Now incidentally, Mercer's daughter Mercedes is fronting the Ellington Orchestra now.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Sinatra a couple of times. I guess you probably didn't get to know him too well.
First time I played for him was at the Copacabana in New York. I went in as a substitute. I was playing studio work then. I was in graduate school. This is in the early 60s, maybe 64, something like that. I was in graduate school. A friend of mine called me up. He was in the Poconos with some chick. He went away for a weekend with this chick and stayed longer than. And he said, "Hey, will you sub for me at the Copa?" I said, "Yeah, sure. I'll be in New York. What time you want me there?" He said, "Well, you'll need a tuxedo and you have to be there. The show starts at 8." So I went in, and there it was Sinatra. Sinatra was making a comeback then, and then I played for him in Atlantic City and the Latin Casino in New Jersey, which was over in Cherry Hill. So we knew each other quite well. Played for him each time he came into Atlantic City.
I know he kind of kept his distance from people. Did you get to know him in any sense?
That's a good question, Andy. He was not an easy guy to know.
No.
Not an easy guy to know. He was very personal.
Yeah.
Here's a guy that took 2 or 3 showers a day. Very closed, very personal type of guy. I have an idea he was a lonely man. Once in a while, he would come in to the orchestra room and talk with us, and just sit down and we'd talk about the foods that our mother used to make and stuff, And incidentally, when his mother was killed in an airplane crash, it was his plane that crashed. They picked her up in New Jersey and was flying her to California, and they crashed, and she died. Dolly died. My mother wrote to him, and he wrote back. And but we used to talk about the Italian foods and stuff like that. And he was a very, very nice man, but complex, very complex. He knew every inch of every arrangement that you had. I mean, he knew every note of it. And that's why it was always a little bit scary to play for him, because he was a perfectionist right down the line. Never liked to do things over. He'd always do it the first time, and that was it. He would do. In Atlantic City, he was one of the few acts that did just one show. He wouldn't do a second show. Yeah. But a very, very, I think a very lonely person. For some reason, I don't know why I felt that way, but I always felt that. And hey, by the way, when you worked for him, you didn't go like this. You wore a suit. After 6 o'clock at night, you wore a dark suit too, and you travel. Play for when we were playing. I played every week there, and when you played for other acts, I mean, you could put on a sweatsuit and sweatshirt and drive home. Not with Frank Sinatra. You had to be dressed up, and he was pretty. And you wore a tuxedo. There was no. Most of the acts we wore a black shirt. And because we're on stage, and they didn't want anything shiny, but Sinatra was tuxedo, and the orchestra was on stage. And I called him Mr. Sinatra. Nobody. I don't remember anybody calling him Frank.
Yeah, I would think not. Oh, something else I wanted to ask you about Charlie Parker was what were your first impressions of bebop when you first started? When it was something new?
Good point. I can remember. Exactly. I was in what would be maybe 8th grade, around in there, what would be junior high school. And a friend of mine, Harry Moon, a drummer that I went all through school with and then worked with after, and unfortunately he died a few years ago, but he said, hey, you got to listen to this. And it was Parker Gillespie recording. I said, my God. It was so different from everything. Because I was Harry James and Roy Eldridge and all these people, and I thought, my God, these guys are playing blistering stuff. And then I guess maybe a year or so later, I was in early grades in high school, and we all put our money together and went over to 52nd Street to see Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker, 52nd Street in New York, which they later became known as Swing Street, where all these little clubs were. And I remember going in and seeing a sign on the wall that said capacity 80 people. They were there, they were small places. So my impression of bebop was it was incredible.
Yeah. What about you told us the story in your class last semester, but just for the record, what about when you met Louis Armstrong?
Oh God, yeah. I was in the orchestra at CBS, and CBS came out of 57th Street. There was this big, large complex there. Judy Garland's show came out of there. Jackie Gleason's show came out of there. I was doing the Gary Moore show with Carol Burnett. That came out of there. And the Ed Sullivan show came out of CBS. Ed Sullivan show was live. Everything else was on tape. I had been on the road and had worked a lot with a guy named Al Gray that lived right up here off of Mount Pleasant Avenue. He and I had worked for Sammy together and people like that. And I had a break or something. We were doing touch-ups before the show was going to be taped. And he said to me, hey, Bill, Pops is over next door. He's going to be on the Ed Sullivan show this weekend. This was a Thursday. And he said, would you like to meet him? I said, God, yes. Love to meet him. Yeah. So we go over, and there was, Andy, there was like this big loading dock outside of CBS, and they had a trailer and a trailer and a trailer and a trailer. And Judy Garland had a trailer. Louis Armstrong had a trailer. One of these, 30, 40 feet long trailer, like, you see at trailer parks and so forth.
Yeah.
And so we go over, Al Gray and I go over together. And Louis there with a couple people. He's in his underwear. And he's got his glasses, I'll never forget, his glasses down like this. And Al Gray, who knew him quite well, said, "Pops, I want you to meet a fellow trumpet player." And Pop said, "Man, you tear up them dots." We were all readers, And talked to him for about an hour, I guess. We talked mouthpieces as usual and talked trumpets and stuff. A very, very nice man, and one hell of a good player.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was really, but he was appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show that weekend. Yeah, that's the only time I ever met him.
Only once.
I saw him play several times when he was in adjacent groups or something, but the only time I ever met and talked with him.
Yeah, that's really something. When was that?
That would have been during the era I was at CBS, which would have been through 63, 64, and early 65.
So kind of towards the end of his life. He died in about 71, I think.
So, who's that? Armstrong?
Yeah.
I think he was a very nice man. He was always talked music, always talked music. Very, very, I thought, very nice man.
Yeah.
But I idolized him. Geez.
Yeah.
God, you're standing in the presence of greatness, for God's sake.
Yeah, how could you not idolize him as a trumpet player?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we talked mouthpieces.
Yeah.
He played on a Giardinelli mouthpiece. Screw rim. The rim came off, so that he could put a different backing on it and still kept the same thing. But he played on a Giardinelli.
I don't know one mouthpiece from another myself, so I'll take
Well, actually, Giardinelli had a music store on 48th Street where all the music stores were. And he had a lathe there, and he made special mouthpieces, And he made a special one for Louis. And we all played on a Giardinelli at one point or another. I may have, if I think of it, I'll bring one in and show you. They had different backings. But so that you could screw the rim off and put it on another backing, and you'd have a different depth to the cup, but still the same feeling on your lips. And Louis played the Giardinelli. Played a Selmer trumpet.
I'll ask you about a couple other people. What about Count Basie?
Oh, Basie was a sweetheart. I loved that man. I loved him. We had a lot in common. I never worked with him, but I wrote for him a lot. He was from Red Bank, New Jersey. My father's family was from Long Branch, New Jersey, which is, 3-4 miles from Red Bank. Count Basie was an absolute sweetheart and a good musician.
Yeah, I love his music.
Oh, God. I wrote quite a few things for him. I'll bring you some.
Yeah, I'd like to take
some were recorded, but Basie was an absolute sweetheart. I don't know of anybody in the world that had anything ever bad to say about Count Basie. He was a big gambler, big gambler. Played horses all the time, but that would be probably from his background. He grew up next to Monmouth Park, which is a big racetrack in South Jersey. But he said one time, my luck has been so bad that when I go to the window to buy the tickets to bet on horses, they come already torn up.
I guess everybody has their vices in this business.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think if anybody were to say to me, who would be your favorite jazz person, I would have to say the Count Basie Band.
Why?
I think it was a swinging band. It played with a lot of feeling and everything. So did Ellington too, but Basie was a different kind of thing. It was a thrilling kind of swinging band. Everybody wanted to write for him too.
Did you ever meet Ella?
I don't think so. I knew her husband, Ray Brown. I know she was on shows but she always performed with a trio, so I never played for her. I don't ever remember meeting her, Andy, at all, but I knew her husband. Her husband was from Pittsburgh, by the way, Ray Brown. Yeah. They have a son. They had a son. From what I understand, she was a very, very nice lady, too. Yeah. Really terrific talent.
Absolutely.
Whew. I mean, you're following some good names, boy.
Yeah.
Really legendary people.
Yeah, and you've worked with most of them. That's what amazes me.
Well, it was a job, Andy. You know, it was a. You know, I'm a trumpet player.
It's true, but for somebody who's outside of the business, it seems so extraordinary. You know?
Well, maybe, but essentially, that's what we do.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we do, and if we're lucky enough to, I think it's a matter of luck, and then being able to do the job too. You know, and that's all. You know, part of it. I had good training, and I was lucky. I think I've been very, 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 very lucky.
Yeah, I'd say so. What about Sammy?
Sammy,
Yeah.
nice guy, had been hurt a lot. I can remember. You know what he said to me the first time I played for him? I came in and read the book. He used a small group, like a kind of a small group. There were 5 horns, I think, 2 trumpets, trombone, a couple saxophones, 2 or 3 saxophones. I think there were maybe 10 or 12 of us that played for him. Of course, when he came to Latin Casino, there was a full orchestra there too, but he preferred a smaller group. He played excellent drums, by the way, and was a great dancer.
Yeah.
But one of his closest friends was Al Gray, and Al Gray and I were very close friends. Al Gray played here many times as a guest artist and whatever. Al and I were very, very, very close friends, and but Sammy was a very nice man. My guess is that he had been hurt a lot too, you know, in his lifetime. I would say probably the most talented single person that I ever played for. He was a good dancer, a hell of a good singer, very good singer, and a very, very, very good drummer. But here was a guy that had no chance for an education. To my knowledge, he never was involved with drugs at all.
Never heard of any.
Do you know, when we used to play an overture type thing before he came on, and he would stand right there, and the stage is out here and the audience is out here. You'd have to walk by him and kiss him on the cheek when you walked on stage, because he wanted to know if anybody was drinking. Okay?
Yeah.
And so the band was really clean, you know, the guys that traveled with him. But after the show, his suite of rooms had food and booze and everything else. And now I always drove home. But in Atlantic City, I mean, the guys would party all night with them, you know, and drink up a storm. I don't know. I'm pretty sure he was never involved with any kind of drugs.
I never heard anything about that either. So.
No, and neither was Basie. I mean, they would drink scotch and milk. How about that one?
I don't know.
That was a favorite drink, I think. Scotch and milk. Yeah. And Sinatra used to drink scotch too.
Yeah.
And he could have afforded much higher class scotch. He used to drink Red Label, Johnny Walker Red Label. They put a bottle in his casket when he was buried. They put a Johnny Walker Red Label in his casket.
One other name, and that's one of my favorites, Cab Calloway. Did you know him?
No, never met him.
Oh, gee.
Had a lot of respect for him. A lot of respect for him. I think he probably was the guy that brought along a lot of people. I know that Gillespie worked for him.
Yeah, that's right.
And Charlie Parker did, and Billy Eckstein did. And Cab Calloway was a big name in the black community. I mean, one can only imagine what he would have become had it not been such a racially divided era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I never met him. A lot of respect for him, though.
Yeah, no, I love his records. He was a hell of a performer.
Oh my God, yeah. I'll tell you what. When I was at the Showboat for 2.5 years, and we played in a part of the Showboat called New Orleans Square, and they had 6 different bands that played there. Music from 11 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock the next morning. Every 4 hours, a different band. And then once in a while, I would have to sub for a friend who got hung up someplace and couldn't make it, and would call and say, "Hey, can you fill in for me?" Yeah. And Al Harrison usually, and so I became pretty close friends with a drummer named Chris Colombo, who had been with Cab Calloway, had been with Louis Jordan. He was a black guy. He was 93, wow. And he's working 6 days a week in Atlantic City. And his band would come on before the band I was working with, but sometimes I would work with his band, with the band he was with. But when he finished, then we would go on. He would always sit and rest back in the orchestra room. And I would always, because I had such respect for him, I would, during the first break, go back and walk him out to his car, which was all the way down this long hallway. And so we became, pretty close friends. And he had played with Cab Calloway. And of course, Louis Jordan. He made all those Louis Jordan records that were so famous in the early 50s. To sort of push toward rock and roll.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I actually met Cab Calloway's grandson a couple years ago.
No kidding.
Yeah, he did a concert here in Philly, and I went to see it, and then I got to meet
Oh,
him
for
afterwards.
God's sake.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Are you in touch with him at all?
No. I just met him the one time.
Boy, that's a legendary name, man. Cab
Yeah.
Calloway. Jeez.
His grandson told me that he was actually very shy in real life. That kind of surprised me because he was so wild on stage.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah, different type of personality. Louis Prima was like that.
Louis
too.
Prima, yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad's a big Louis Prima fan too.
Yeah. Louis
Great.
Prima had a bass player with him was from Trenton. His name is Roland Diorio.
Sounds familiar.
And yeah, he was Louis Prima's bass player. And Bobby Carter worked with him, and I know those two guys very well. So I got to know Louis a little bit. Louis came to Palumbo's in Philly a lot, and married a girl from Trenton, New Jersey. Yep, yeah. The girlfriend. Her father owned a nightclub there called Jimmy's, and no, Louis Prima was a very good trumpet player, by the way.
Terrific.
I mean, he really was.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks of him as this crazy guy, with Keely Smith and all. But, yeah. Always married young chicks, though.
So, I was curious, does the name Carl Stalling mean anything to you?
Yeah.
Yeah? He was the guy who composed the music for the Warner Brothers cartoons, all the Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Yeah.
Have you
Brilliant.
heard his stuff? Yeah, he was brilliant. I love his music.
Oh, great stuff.
Yeah. Really wild, too. It just breaks all the rules.
But beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love every time.
Oh, that's a legendary name. Yeah.
I watch cartoons all the time now just to hear the music.
I think the Philadelphia Orchestra is starting to do concerts where they show the film and play the music as the film is going on.
The Philadelphia Orchestra?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they're starting to do that.
I'll have to check that out. I'd love to see that.
Yeah, you know what? I'll talk to some of the guys and see when it is. You know who's starting to do that? The black singer. Don't worry, get happy. That guy.
Can't remember the name.
Anyhow, he became the conductor of the Pittsburgh Symphony. He's a good musician. He does all of these. I'll think of his name at some point, probably on my way home. But he started doing that in Pittsburgh, of getting the music that was written for the film and showing the film and playing the cartoon music, which is great stuff.
Yeah,
man.
absolutely.
Oh, it's terrific stuff.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? What are some of your current projects and things?
Okay. Right now, I'm finishing another march that my publisher's going to publish for football, a football field. I'm finishing that. Just sent a whole box of music over to England because I'm going over there in the spring or summer. And I usually will be working on a variety of things, Andy. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm writing, and I've been writing this for about a year and a half, a piece called Adagio for Band, in memory of a good friend of mine who was a professor at Temple University. And it's, you may know the Adagio for Strings of Samuel Barber, which was the music that they played in Platoon or something, one of the movies. Yeah. And anyhow, this is a Adagio for symphonic band. And it's being written for the South, like you to come, the Southampton Community Band that was started by Gil Guillaume, who was a teacher at William Tennant and retired, and started this community band. They give, you ready for this one? They give 6 full scholarships a year for music. 6! And the youngest person in the band is a clarinet player in school. She's 14, just turned 14. The oldest guy is 84. He's a retired medical doctor who bought himself a new tuba, played in high school and college, and now is back playing with this band. So you run the gamut. They're all either school kids or retired people that play in this band. And they pack the place. They pack the place is loaded every time they give a concert because they give these scholarships and stuff. And that's what I'm working on.
Do you still do live gigs?
Yeah. Not as much as, there's not that much happening.
Not as much, yeah.
Not that much happening, There's not, Atlantic City had hundreds of musicians working, and now they're down to practically nothing. Yeah. And I do. Mostly what I'm doing now is big band stuff and raising money for foundations. Just raised a lot of money for the Ewing Township Patriotic Committee. They made a recording of the date. If I can remember, I'll write myself a note, and I'll bring you a copy of it.
Okay.
A recording.
And just to kind of sum things up, obviously you're a guy who's been around a long time. You've done a lot of things. What are some of the things that you've learned in your life? Just to kind of sum things up.
Learned?
Obviously, yeah, you've been around, done all these things. And
boy, that's a good question. If anything, Andy, that people are flesh and blood, and they have feelings. And anytime I can help somebody or be nice to somebody, that's what I've learned. I've learned that there's flesh and blood out there, and it just is a waste of time to have arguments or conflict or anything like that, And I tell you, my daughter, who's a professor in one of the colleges in New Jersey, she and I were talking, and she said, "What do you think about the word happiness?" I said, "Well, I don't know if there's a happiness. I think there's a contentment that you can search to be content with things." But I love people. I do. I really do. I think I often worry about the world I'm leaving you guys. I mean that sincerely. I wish I could make it better for you. I wish I could make society better. I wish I could eliminate some of the hatred that I've seen. God Almighty, it doesn't pay. It doesn't make sense, Life is very precious. So I think if I learned anything, I've really begun to realize that a long time ago that there's flesh and blood with everybody. Everybody has feelings. Everybody, and you can never nobody ever makes it alone. You know, I think relationships and friendships are the most important things. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
I'm sure it does, absolutely.
But you know, it just it's why I lament, you know, losing people. I lost a friend of mine not too long ago. He and I used to run together, and his wife called me when he died, and she said, "Bill, don't grieve. He didn't suffer. He died in his sleep." And I said, "Well, you know, wow." But the relationships are important, Andy.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think if you can do something good, you know the old cliche, live your life so that when you die, even the undertaker will be sorry. Incidentally, I'm a guy who goes to Mass every day. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Sometimes I don't make it. But luckily, I go to one church on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday because they have a noontime Mass. And that's when on Wednesday I go there. On Tuesday and Thursday, I usually go to New Hope, which has Mass at 7:30 at night. I try to make Mass every day. I always did. When I was on the road and everything, I always did. It was always, you know, just one of those things. I don't really talk about it very much, but I'm a strong believer in prayer and whatever. I've been very lucky in my life. I had last rites twice. You know, came out of it. I wasn't expected to. I last right once in the Army and once when I had a heart attack. Yeah. You know, that'll straighten things out for you too. You know, when you're looking to say, well, hey, wait a minute, man, there's a door open here and I may be walking through. You know.
I'm an agnostic myself, but to each his own.
That's cool. That's cool, man.
Yeah, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever.
You know, it's whatever suits you. You know, it's whatever suits you, and I never condemn anybody. That's why I just happened to mention that to you that's what makes me feel good.
Yeah.
That's what gets me through things. You know.
And that's fine. I respect that. You know.
And I respect your views.
Yeah.
Believe me, you got a lot of logic behind you there. You know that?
What do you mean?
There's a lot of logic to that philosophy. You know, there even if you know, as you go to Mass as I do, you know, there's still questions, man, as to what this is all about.
Yeah.
You know, it sometimes doesn't make sense. I had a graduate student here who was a Carmelite nun, and she had lupus, and so she had been in a cloistered order for 26 years, and when they found she had lupus, they said, do what you want to do because you don't have long to live. And she wanted to study music, and she came here. And she was an advisee of mine. She had her master's degree from here. And I would play piano for her and stuff and whatever. And we talked, you know, about religion. I have in my family, I have some cousins who are priests and nuns and stuff. Anyhow. And we talked, and she said, you know, it's just so vast that nobody can understand, you know. And so I firmly respect everybody's beliefs and everybody's positions. But everybody's flesh and blood, man.
Yeah.
You know?
And you talk about how music is an escape from reality and how it's hard to face reality. I find that, for me, I find that escape through laughter. I think that's important too.
Oh yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that's a good point.
I do, because that's one of my major areas of interest is comedy.
Yeah.
I love all kinds, all the way from the Marx Brothers to Mark Twain, all kinds of anything that makes me laugh.
Oh yeah. You know, one of my last Christmas, my daughters gave me the collection of the Golden Girls. The Christmas before that, they gave me the complete collection of Laurel and Hardy.
Oh. I didn't know that was out. I didn't know there was a
On
complete...
DVDs, yeah. Oh, they're hilarious.
Yeah, they were great.
Oh, God. And, yeah, I think that's important. That's good stuff, man. Boy.
Yeah, that's about all the questions I have. So thanks a lot. This has been a lot of fun.
Oh, God bless you, my friend. You're a
You
sweet
too.
guy, and I'm honored to know you, believe me.
As long as mutual, I'm really happy to know you.